Commonwealth's attorneys and I have concluded that the NCAA sanctions were overreaching and unlawful.
Someone's got to develop a product that you and I, as a consumer, we're going to want to buy.
The country needs a comprehensive energy plan.
Good morning and welcome to this edition of For the Record. We are talking Super Tuesday, and to do that, we bring in Penn State University Professor Michael Berkman, the director for the Center for American Political Responsiveness. Ms. Berkman, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. Pleasure. So, Super Tuesday, 12 states and American Samoa going to the polls. Real quick, running it down: Alabama, Arkansas, Georgia, Massachusetts, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Texas, Vermont, Virginia. Both parties on those. Alaska, Republicans; American Samoa, Democrats; Colorado, little complicated caucus out there. Republicans not attached, Democrats attached. What do we expect to happen?
Wow, well, that is an exciting day. There's a lot going on. And staying away from predictions about what will happen, I know what we'll be looking for. We'll be looking to see if Ted Cruz can finally win a state after winning in Iowa in the first place, and especially whether Rubio can break through and finally win something, although this is a tough environment for Marco Rubio. I
like how you said Rubio, because it seems like the mainstream media is just shoving him down our throats as this is the guy for the Republicans, but he's yet to win anything. You got to win something if you want to make it all the way. Small state caucus and primaries: Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada. What could they actually tell us, or doesn't even matter on such a grand scale of a day of primaries like this?
Yeah, I think by the time you get to Super Tuesday, you're focusing less on caucuses, although they do award delegates for what they tell us, than you are on the big state primaries. But the Iowa caucus is a different thing, and the Iowa caucus plays a huge role in winnowing out candidates and giving initial indications of strength, of attracting media attention to certain candidates.
I'm not a big fan of caucuses. This is just my personal opinion, but I do like Iowa. Ever since I was younger and I started following politics, I thought it allowed that personal interaction out in Iowa, and it was just such a unique state. Now, Alaska, small population, but a big state area-wise. I'm not really that big a fan. Nevada, it seems like it went well out there for the Democrats, but Republicans, it kind of seemed like it was a mess. You know, we had somebody saying to CNN, I voted for Donald Trump twice. I think it was CNN. There were people wearing gear at the polls for who they were voting for. It just kind of seemed a mess. What are your thoughts specifically on that?
Yeah, well, I think the Iowa caucus is something different. I mean, the Iowa caucus is a different political culture in the upper Midwest. They've been doing this for a very long time. It has played a key role in several campaigns over the years. I wonder if its usefulness is starting to decline a little bit, because the type of retail long-term campaigning that seemed to be the rule in Iowa, that gave a chance for candidates who were perhaps lesser known to really break out. You saw much less of that in Iowa this year. You saw some of it, but you know, Trump's success was not really based on any kind of, I realize he didn't win, but he did quite well, was not based on the kind of retail politicking that you had come to expect from Jimmy Carter or Barack Obama in 2008. But the Nevada caucuses, yeah, they were a mess. They are new, so they're less practiced at them. It's a different kind of political culture. They're held at sort of weird times. And the Republican one was just, I thought, overwhelmed with much higher turnout than they were expecting. There had been some indications leading up to it that this would be a problem. They didn't have enough workers at them. The workers did not appear to be well trained. I still haven't actually figured out whether you were allowed to be wearing campaign gear while you were sitting there. I saw lots of noise about that the evening that it was going. I would be surprised if if Nevada is really able to maintain this position after what happened this year. It just seemed like a bit of a debacle.
Oh yeah, debacle, yeah. Absolutely. The GOP, state GOP actually tweeted out that it was legal for them to wear, but is that an accurate statement, or are they covering maybe a mistake on there? But
and you know, ultimately it comes up to the national party at the convention, or the delegates at the convention, whether they're going to seat delegates from a state. So when it gets too messy, then the legitimacy of the delegates can get thrown into question.
Absolutely. How do you work these states on Super Tuesday? Obviously, it's a short turnaround from Nevada and South Carolina. It's got to be a different type of campaign than a ground game, say, in New Hampshire.
Yeah, well, my stock answer on that would be you put a lot of money into media, you're running a lot of commercials, but I say stock answer because from what I've seen, Donald Trump hasn't invested any money in advertising on Super Tuesday yet, but usually that's why you're holding up your money to be able to do a large advertising spend on that day. It is obviously much more difficult to touch base in as many places. You're not holding living room events. You're flying into an airport, doing a rally, getting back on the plane and leaving.
I guess you don't really have to spend your money on advertisement when you always are going after the Pope, or you're finding somebody from TMZ to MSNBC to Fox News, you're getting it all for free.
It seems to be. I mean, Trump is really throwing that model into question. I mean, part of it is, yes, he gets free media like nobody else. But also maybe he knows in this kind of highly fragmented media environment that we're in now, maybe advertising just doesn't carry the bang for the buck that it used to.
Who does this day matter the most to? Is it Bernie Sanders? Is it Hillary Clinton? Is it to Republicans specifically as a party, the Democrats? Is it to the establishment of the GOP? Who has to be a big winner come Tuesday?
Yeah, well, I think Ted Cruz has to win Texas. Otherwise, I don't see how he makes any kind of case for continuing. So I would say it's a very big day for Ted Cruz. You know, at some point, Marco Rubio has to win. And he's a great conservative unifier, but he's not able to win yet in a Republican electorate. But I don't see a lot of, I think these southern states are actually fairly tough for Rubio when he has Cruz in the race, and given the unexpected strength that Trump is really showing there. These are not good states for Bernie Sanders, with a few exceptions: Massachusetts, perhaps Minnesota, and of course Vermont. But he needs to keep amassing delegates, and I think he's kind of given up on the South a little bit. And that's going to be a problem, because the way the Democratic primaries will continue all the way down the line, and we'll talk about the Republicans as we go forward, it's going to be proportional representation all the way through. So he needs to have a strong presence, and he can pick up some delegates even if he's not winning states.
Real quick, voter turnout. Would you say that based on Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, their enthusiasm, among voters, do you think maybe this is a huge Super Tuesday turnout across every state?
Well, I don't think the Democratic turnout has been all that impressive. Compared to 2008, when Barack Obama really did strong turnout, Bernie Sanders hasn't been able to do that. Republican turnout's been very high.
Republican turnout. Mr. Trump, a big thing to do with that Republican turnout, a big reason why that Nevada had such a chaotic caucus the other night. We are talking Super Tuesday here on WHVL's For the Record. Stay with us. We're going to break down the Republicans in just a bit. Welcome back to WHVL's For the Record. Speaking with Penn State University professor Michael Berkman. He is the director for the Center of American Political Responsiveness. Talking Super Tuesday. We're going to get into the Republicans a little bit right now. And when you're talking Republicans, you got to talk about Donald Trump leading Super Tuesday polls in 6 states. Last Republican candidate to sweep Super Tuesday was Bob Dole. Can he do it? And what does that say about the Republican electorate?
Well, if Trump sweeps all the states, then it says the Republican electorate is very unhappy with the establishment Republican Party. That's for sure. I mean, the really interesting thing to see in terms of Trump going forward is what happens as the field winnows down. Does he start to break out above 40% of the vote? Can he get close to the 50% number? That will be a real indication of strength. But of course, that's going to, right now, you still have 5 or 6 candidates in the race. And so he can win with 35%, 38%.
The experts, and I'll put that in quotations, on the national stage and even in the establishment have said he was unelectable. He can't possibly win that many votes. Are you surprised at where he is at now? And can there really be that much voter anger in this country?
Yes, when you think about it, on both sides, you have candidates who are essentially outside of the major parties doing pretty well. I don't think Bernie Sanders is obviously doing as well as Donald Trump is, but Bernie Sanders was not a Democrat, and Donald Trump was maybe a Republican, maybe he wasn't. It's kind of hard to tell. Yet both of them are doing quite well. So, you know, there has been massive declines in trust in government since, go back to 2001. There is just a lot of discontent on the Republican side, in particular, I think, with, you know, the establishment Republicans, by which I would say by the congressional Republicans, to do everything they promised to do, to defund and to, you know, pull out Obamacare by its roots, and to basically be able to govern the country from 1 or 2 chambers of the government. And they haven't been able to do that. And there's a lot of anger about that, coupled with, you know, a fair element of fear and a lot of economic discontent that's still coming out of the economic collapse, the housing crisis, all of that. So yeah, there is some unhappiness out there.
DT, so far, all rhetoric seems nobody's exempt from getting shots taken at them, whether it's the Pope, Megyn Kelly. No policies, though. When does he start to be attacked on that, and is Tuesday, after the Tuesday results, is Wednesday when that finally starts to take place?
Well, you know, usually with candidates coming out of primaries, we ask whether they can moderate their issue positions going into the general election and pull towards the middle. Donald Trump has shown an amazing capacity to not really have issue positions and to be certainly not to really have conservative issue positions in many areas. In other areas, he certainly does. I think the real test of whether or not he starts to speak more substantively is whether or not any of the Republican candidates really start to attack him or not. And right now, what really strikes me is that in their defeat speeches, I was going to say victory speeches because they sound like it half the time from Rubio and Cruz, they don't really go after Trump. They're not really spending a lot of money going after Trump. They're not organizing opposition to Trump in the states. They don't really have surrogates going after Trump. And so he's able to get away with doing whatever he seems to want to do. And I'm somewhat mystified. You know, the only thing I can really think to explain it is that everybody who does go after Trump ends up losing. I mean, he's just a better fighter than Jeb Bush was, and then Rick Perry was, and then everybody else seems to be. And there may just be a real reluctance to take him on.
The only one to hit him has been Mama Bush, and then he ended up going after her, and he even came out on top of that.
Amazing what he did with the Bushes, actually. It's just
Cruz leads Texas and Arkansas, should be strong states down there. For him and Marco Rubio, I mean, this has got to be, and John Kasich as well, this has got to be like their Waterloo, where at least Kasich has to be able to move up into the top two on a wide basis among states, and those other two, they got to be able to, say, bring home the bacon and pull out a W.
Yeah, well, Kasich wants to withstand the pressure from others in his party to pull out until he can get out of the South into some territory that he feels may be more comfortable. I'm not sure he can really hold on quite that long without turning in some stronger performances. But Super Tuesday is not a good day the way it lays out anyway for Kasich. Rubio, I think, has more staying power. To me, Rubio's big day will come on the 15th, where he is going to have to win Florida. And I believe he has to win Ohio, too. And both are winner-take-all states. The Republican rules for allocating delegates changes on the 15th. Rubio, I know, has had that day in his mind, thinking this is where I start to make my move. I assume the strategy of going after Cruz rather than Trump is to get into a two-man race when he gets there. Yep. But there are a lot of assumptions in there that may not work out for him.
I'll be honest, I've always been I don't want to say a little biased, but I've always kind of been a fan since the first debate of Kasich, and I thought if he could get to the 15th and win Ohio, that could be a big boost to him. We kind of already covered the great uniter, Rubio. How many states, because I know he has to win Florida if he gets to the 15th, but does he have to win, is 3 the magic number on Tuesday? They say he's ahead in Minnesota.
Yeah. Well, there are two ways of looking at that. I mean, one is the perception that's created and what that's going to mean going forward in terms of money coming in and Republican establishment, you know, even more coming in behind him, and delegate counts. So, I mean, at some point, Rubio has to start winning delegates. And on the 15th, whoever wins these states more and more going forward, they're not all winner-take-all, but they have allocation rules that mean the winner picks up more and more delegates as you go forward. So at that point, delegates are really going to become important. They're less important right now. So, yes, Rubio has to win Florida. I think he probably needs to win Ohio, too. And, of course, Kasich is strong in Ohio as well.
Question on everybody's mind. Everybody's talking. The end of the GOP, if this ends up being a brokered convention. What are your opinions on that?
Well, I wonder what it means for the GOP just if Trump wins, not if it goes to a brokered convention. Because, you know, you usually think, and there's good reason to believe this has been the case, that the party establishment, by which I mean office holders, essentially, have a large, if not determinative voice in who the nominee is for their party and who they're running on tickets with. Both parties have gone about this differently, but essentially that's what you expect. If Trump were to come out of this with absolutely no support from the party, I'm not quite sure what that means for the party.
It's definitely an interesting dynamic. It's being covered ad nauseum on the national thing. Lou Dobbs I feel like every night that's what he's talking about on his program. So we've talked a little bit about the Republicans. Super Tuesday also big for the Democrats as well. When we come back, we're going to cover, is Hillary Clinton starting to feel the burn, and when does the heat get turned up? Super Tuesday, just 2 days away. Talking with the director of Center for American Political Responsiveness, professor at Penn State, Mr. Michael Berkman. We're going to talk Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders. Somebody, please explain Bernie Sanders' rise to me. A socialist, a socialist. I wish Hillary Clinton would have just said that, drop the mic, walk off stage. Does this mean that America has Clinton fatigue?
I think it means that on the left, there too is a lot of anger and discontent. I think the targets are somewhat different, and the explanation for why they're upset is somewhat different. But Bernie Sanders has developed a very compelling story for what many on the left feel is wrong with American politics right now. And I think the socialist label, first of all, Bernie Sanders very intelligently brought it up early and forcefully to try to redefine it. And I think he understood that he was redefining it to a different audience than we may be used to thinking of with the term socialist. The Cold War is long over. You know, younger voters who are flocking to him, they don't really have negative connotations about the idea of socialist. I think many older voters may still, but he's also been pretty effective in redefining that. Remember, too, you're in a Democratic electorate here. You're in a Democratic electorate that has become more liberal. You're in a Democratic Party that the elites have become more liberal. So a lot of what he's saying is just not that far out anymore.
There were a time where even I thought in the Democratic Party that rhetoric in his campaign would not even be able to survive. Does this election cycle and his rise, does that mean that our assumptions of the electorate in the country, that it just has to be changed? I don't mean change. You have to blow up the model of your expectations.
Well, the Democratic Party's changed. You know, this is not the Democratic Party of the Democratic Leadership Council of Bill Clinton in 1992. It's a different Democratic Party that is, you know, the country's gone through a lot. There's been a liberal response to it, too, and there's been a progressive president. And so I think, you know, Democratic Party is moving to the left.
Can he turn around African Americans to get behind him?
Well, that is the big thing, because we haven't had many tests of it yet, but and South Carolina is just coming up this Saturday when we're taping, obviously. But in polls, he's doing quite poorly among African Americans. I don't think it has anything to do with his issue positions. I just think it's a matter of familiarity and comfort that the Clintons, both of them, have been friends with the African-American community, with African-American elites, with African-American office holders for a very long time. And, you know, in politics, that still matters.
Clinton, ahead in all the polls except in Vermont and Massachusetts. I mean, does she have to, I don't want to say just win the states, eventually is this a perfect time for her to put her foot down and say, I'm the candidate?
Well, undoubtedly she wants to do that. I mean, she would like to close this out as soon as she can. It is harder in the Democratic side even in a two-person race to close it out, because Bernie Sanders can continue to amass delegates even if he's not winning. And he's got money, so he can stick around for quite a while. But I know that, I suspect that Hillary Clinton would like to get this to a point where she is seen as inevitable, and where debates with Bernie Sanders become more about, well, where is the Democratic Party going to be running from in the general election, than about her trying to defeat him. Super Tuesday, big day for that, and then obviously the 15th. If Bernie Sanders doesn't make strong showings, especially on the 15th, hard for me to see where there's a path for him to the nomination.
I'm glad you brought up the position of the Democratic Party in the general election. Now, Jeb Bush back in, I think it was August of 2015, made the comment about free everything. 2012, Mitt Romney made the comment along the lines of free everything. Clinton hit back at both of them. Now she returns claiming, you know, I come out here with policies and this and that and this. I'm not promising free everything. Is that finally her realizing, like, I have to attack Bernie Sanders?
Well, I think she realized she had a good issue with the health care plans, that Bernie Sanders, by laying out a position that essentially meant we're going to reopen this health care debate, went to a place where I think a lot of Democrats really don't want to go to. Even though they may agree with his goals, that's just not a place they want to go to. So I suspect that's a piece of it. Yeah, and there is, you know, this is an effective argument. What he's talking about would require changes in tax policy in a significant way to raise the necessary revenues, and it would redistribute quite a bit of money through social programs and a different kind of social welfare state. That's why he calls himself a socialist.
More and more emails, and just sticking with Hillary, more and more emails seem to come out, and there's been more people within the Democratic Party that have spoken out maybe about, is Hillary going to get charged? What is the effect is that going to have on the race? Like, it's got to keep Bernie Sanders at least motivated that this, even though it's an outside possibility, it still could happen.
I suppose it could. I obviously have no idea, but there's no doubt that would be very damaging. And I mean, there's a sense that Hillary Clinton is a weak candidate on some fronts. I mean, there is, you know, if you had a campaign of Bernie Sanders and I'm sorry, if you had a campaign of Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, you'd have two candidates that are about as unfavorably rated as you can get, which would be very unusual. I have no idea how that works, except I guess that turnout would probably be kind of low. So Hillary Clinton, yeah, there are clearly some problems with Hillary Clinton. She also really has some strengths, you know. I mean, women do tend to vote at higher rates than men, especially in general elections. She has strong advantages there. There's some other places where she has strong advantages.
That low turnout, do I get a Jim Webb, Michael Bloomberg possible third-party ticket? That could be, that's been like my dream. And I'll say this, we are not advocating for Hillary Clinton to be charged on For the Record. We are just asking a question if it could possibly happen. Now, super delegates, how are they going to affect this race possibly for the Democrats? Because the count right now is 502 to 70, but the races have been much closer to that. Big reason, super delegates are 451 to 19.
Right, so keep in mind that super delegates, unlike delegates chosen through nominations and caucuses, are unpledged. So they can change their mind in a way that pledged delegates cannot. They're committed on the first ballot. They tend to go for the party, so they tend to go for the candidate that won their state. It's kind of unusual for super delegates to go against the popular vote, either in their state or I think in the country at large. I remember there were concerns about this in 2008 as well. I suspect the superdelegates are trying to create a sense of momentum right now because they want Hillary Clinton. They think she's safer at the top of the ticket. But if Bernie Sanders shows real strength, they'll feel the burn.
Just give me one name. Who does a moderate want to win on both sides come Super Tuesday? Just a name.
Well, I actually think we're at a time where, you know, candidates are kind of base-driven. But I would think that can't answer that question.
Okay. We're talking politics. That's a politically correct answer. Mr. Berkman, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you at home for watching WHVL's For the Record.